How about now? Fantastic. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Aziz Douai, and I'm the Dean of the Faculty of Graduate Studies and Research. On behalf of the Faculty of Grad Studies and Research and the Office of the Vice President of Research, I'm delighted to welcome you to the Postdoctoral Appreciation Week in its 2025 version here at the University of Regina. Before we start today's proceedings, I would like to acknowledge that the University of Regina is situated on Treaty 4 lands with a presence in Treaty 6. These are the territories of the Nehiyawak, Anishinaabeg, Lakota, Nakota, and the homeland of the Métis Michif Nation. We honor the original caretakers of this land and acknowledge the ongoing contributions of Indigenous peoples to our community and the broader academic enterprise at the University of Regina. As I mentioned earlier, I'm delighted to welcome you to this national and, may I say, international event that appreciates the contributions of our postdocs at the University of Regina, but across the research enterprise internationally. This week is an opportunity to celebrate, as we usually do on an annual basis, the many contributions of postdocs to our research community. As you know, postdocs advance discovery, they advance knowledge across different disciplines, mentor graduate students, and play an essential role in strengthening our university's research profile. We are deeply grateful for their dedication, energy, and impact. So today, I'd like to also extend a warm welcome to all of you joining us today in person. The last numbers that I checked, we have about 33 participants registering in person, but over 80, and I think right now we have about 60 people joining us online for this panel. So thank you for being part of this important conversation. Today's event is focused, as the title states explicitly, it's focused on exploring alt-ac or alternative academic career paths. I am not really sold on the title of alt-ac because when you look at the career pathways that PhD graduates actually pursue, maybe about over 90% of PhD graduates pursue non-tenure track careers. So probably the tenure track pathway is the alt-ac, if I may say so. So that aside, given that non-academic career paths represents the option that most PhD graduates pursue, it's worthwhile for us to draw on the expertise, the experience of postdocs and share those insights with our PhD students, with current postdocs as well, to broaden that knowledge, but also set the expectations about what it means to pursue a non-tenure track career. As we know, many, as I said before, but it's worth repeating, while some of our postdocs and graduate students pursue tenure track roles, many of our students find fulfilling careers in government, industry, nonprofits, education, and a whole range of other sectors. Yet, myths and confusion about these alt-ac career paths persist. So, for me, today's conversation is meant to address some of these myths, some of these kind of some of the confusion that surrounds these alt-ac career paths, and the goal is to expand the possibilities to have that conversation around how to better prepare for these non-tenure track careers. So Joining me today is our panelists here, so I'm gonna briefly introduce them, but I'm also going to invite them to introduce themselves during the back and forth, and of course they will draw on their experience. Without further ado, I'm pleased to start with Dr. Cody Sharpe here, who is an alumnus of the University of Lethbridge, Brock University, and the University of Saskatchewan. Cody earned his PhD in public policy in 2018 while working as a sessional instructor, research assistant, and policy analyst in the nonprofit sector. His career has included stints in provincial and federal government departments, plus roles in the private sector as an advisor to corporate and government clients. Cody currently lives in Moose Jaw and runs a consultancy with his wife and 2 cats that provides guidance on strategic planning, program design, stakeholder engagement, and board development to Saskatchewan nonprofits and Indigenous government agencies. Cody is a director with the Regina Autism Resource Center, the treasurer of the Moose Jaw Kinsmen, and the chair of the Moose Jaw Public Library. On my right, Dr. Supriya Bhat is an experienced climate and sustainability researcher with over 5 years of experience in the relevant field. Currently, she works as a senior research officer within the climate resilience branch in the Ministry of Environment since May 2024. Prior to her current position, she worked as a special project manager at Farm Credit Canada for 1.5 years and research partnerships officer at the U of R research office for 2 years. You were my neighbor, so we missed you. Supriya holds a PhD in biochemistry from the U of R, graduated in 2017, followed by 3 years of postdoctoral research. Supriya also switched to a non-academic career during COVID towards climate and sustainability. She undertook a master's certificate on sustainability and leadership from the University of Toronto and was involved in sustainability projects during her tenure at the research office. In her free time, Supriya enjoys outdoors, traveling, hiking, camping, and canoeing. She also plays tennis and badminton and enjoys spending time with her family. Dr. Lynn Gidluck is our third panelist. She is a partner at Benchmark Public Relations, where she works with governments, nonprofits, and businesses in communications, research, and community development projects. Over the course of her career, she has worked in the Saskatchewan government with the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives and as a consultant on projects spanning the nonprofit, public, and private sectors. A client project led her back to graduate school, where she completed a PhD in public policy and history from the Johnson Shiama Graduate School. In addition to her consulting work, she teaches in Luther's College Nonprofit Sector Leadership and Innovation Program and serves on the management committee of Community Campus Engage Canada, where she advocates for experiential learning and stronger connections between universities and communities. Outside of work, Lynn is frequently at the 13th Avenue Dog Park with Nellie, her spoiled Corgi? Corgi. Just want to make sure. Corgi. Spending time with her husband and 3 daughters or attending live music events. I'm, of course, reading from the bio that was handed to me. One thing that is not here, but I would like to share with you, that Lynn is also supporting the University of Regina's strategic planning process as a senior writer and consultant. So thank you so much. Our fourth panelist is Dr. Liz Vanderlind, right here, who currently serves in the role of Research and Development Consultant with the Office of the Vice President Research at the University of Regina. For the last 10 years, she has been supporting research and development as a research facilitator for INSERC, the Natural Sciences and Engineering Research in the Office of Research Services, also at the University of Regina. Prior to transitioning to a career in research administration, Liz completed a PhD in biology at the U of R, followed by a 2.5 years postdoctoral fellowship in the College of Medicine at the University of Saskatchewan. Again, if I may go off script here, Liz is also the project manager, right? Like that's your official title?
It's not my official title, but it's some of the work that I do.
She does everything to build.
I wear many hats.
Okay, but she is building a province-wide institute, the GIMS Institute, the Global Institute for Energy,
Minerals and Society. Yeah.
So please join me in welcoming our panelists. Thank you so much for being with us here. All right, so to get us started, I'd like to ask each of our panelists a few questions. We'll then move into an open conversation followed by questions from the audience, both here in the room, as well as online. I believe we have now more than 50 chat, okay? And Wendy is gonna be monitoring the chat as well. So to start us off, I'll ask each of you to briefly tell us a little bit about your journey from graduate school to your current career now, and how did you come to pursue an alternative academic career? Would like to take that on.
Go down the line?
Okay.
Sure.
I'll start.
Sure, I can start. Is this mic on? You can hear me? Oh, wait. How did I do the transition? I don't know. It just seems such a crazy journey. Some of it was I had a choice, other times I just had to do whatever I had to do in the moment. I think you mentioned earlier, it was during COVID that I did the transitions. It was a little bit difficult. I came here from India in 2009. I started my master's here at the U of R in biochemistry. I already came with the master's in microbiology, so I was able to transition to PhD in my third year. So I finished my PhD, and then I got a fellowship for postdoc, so it was an easy choice. I didn't know at the time what I wanted to do. I wasn't sure if I wanted to go the academia route or non-academia. It wasn't easy for me to move at that point because my ex-husband now had a job here in town, so I'm like, okay, I got a fellowship from Saskatchewan Health Research Foundation, so it's an easy decision at the time. So I decided to do a postdoc. As you guys know, postdoc is not a permanent solution. It's usually a contract, 1 year, 2 year, whatever. So I did 2 years under Andrew Cameron in biology, and then 1 more year with the Dr. Chris Yost. It was already COVID by then. My postdoc contract ended, and I was in a tricky situation. And unfortunately, I was also getting out of an abusive relationship with my ex-husband at the time. And I had to figure something out. I had a toddler at home. I was a single mother. I had to figure whatever I had to. Luckily, during my PhD and my postdoc, I was involved with a number of committees. I was part of the science safety committee. I was involved in the hiring committee for AVPR. So I had made some connection in the VPR office. So I reached out to Kathy McNatt at the time. Oh, my postdoc contract ended. Is there something I could do at the VPR office to help out? Because I'm kind of in a desperate situation. So luckily I because I was also involved with another committee called the PACS committee. I don't know if you still have that. It was the President's Advisory Committee for Sustainability. So I was involved with some sustainability work, and luckily maybe it was just the right time, right place. Yeah, we're looking for some help. And I started working as a part-time job in Kathy McNatt's office, the VPR office at the time. So it was part-time, but it was sufficient to put food on the table because I needed something to do during COVID. It was kind of tricky. And then through those connections, I figured out they're looking for someone at the research office. They're looking for somebody to help with the research partnerships. The position opened up. That was contract at the time too. It was like a 1 year contract. So I applied, interviewed, and I got that job. So I should say it wasn't like academia has had certain expectation. I guess we'll get into that in detail a little bit. you're expected to move around, get your PhDs from different universities. And otherwise, it's kind of get tricky. Getting academic positions is very, very competitive. And often you're required to do postdoc for more than 5 years or longer, publish or perish, have 10 to 20 publications. And it was really tricky. And at that point, I was in a position where I wasn't fully convinced. I wasn't willing to pay the cost it was going to take. I wasn't able to move because I had a child and my ex-husband. I could not just up and move. So I knew in my mind, okay, I had to do something else out of academia. And I was looking for positions at the time, and luckily, because I was part of all these committees and made some connections, I was able to get that job at the research office. So I guess I had made the decision to go out of academia, but it took some, facing some challenges and just kind of preparation, making those connections to be able to make that switch. Hopefully it's not that difficult for you, because if you prepare in advance, just involve yourself with, associations or committees, whatever, it shouldn't be, hopefully not that difficult, but I feel like in the end, even though looking back, it was that difficult, I feel like it's totally worth it. And, there's certain things that I value the most, which is, work-life balance, having time to be able to pursue hobbies. So, yeah, could be tough, but it's definitely doable, and you have to involve yourself, develop skills that you may or may not learn during your grad studies. So yeah, I'll stop there. We'll get into some other stuff later on.
Thank you so much, Supriya. And I'm just going to note some more keywords here about transitioning from academic to non-academic career, and how that transition is going to take place, being proactive, but also whether you pursue academic career, tenure track, or a non-academic career, it's also about priorities for your life. So I'm going to move to Liz here and invite the rest of the panelists to respond to the same question.
Sure. So is the mic on? Yeah, okay. This is going way back. It was a long time ago. So when I was in grad school here at the U of R, my mind was totally focused on the academic track. I drank the Kool-Aid. I was getting the publications. I got the postdoc fellowship. I went to do my fellowship, and the environment where I was doing my postdoc wasn't as positive as the environment that I was in here. The department I was in was much more isolating, and I found the research a lot less fulfilling. And so I had a little bit of a kind of a crisis almost. I felt so much pressure and expectation that so much had been invested in me as a grad student. My former supervisor, who I had a very good relationship with, not that he explicitly said things to me, but I just felt there was this sort of expectation, and that I would continue on and pursue that. As a woman as well, it sort of felt like, well, if I make decisions based on, my relationship or my personal life, that I'm like giving in, or like I shouldn't give up my career for a man, and things like there were just so many external pressures, and but ultimately I wanted to get out of academia. And so for me, it was a lot of personal struggle to make that decision, while at the same time I was constantly looking for other jobs, looking for other opportunities, and feeling like I didn't have any skills. Like I was constantly worried that I was going to have to go back to school, start from scratch, get actual applicable skills to get a real job. And so ultimately, some of the best advice that I read online somewhere was, to think about, and maybe we'll get into advice later, but I'll just give it right now. Think about the skills that you like using in your day-to-day. So not so much like, I want this job title or I want to do this, but what are the skills? Like, what are you good at? What do you enjoy doing about being a grad student or a postdoc? And are there other opportunities where you could apply those same skills? So for me, I really liked the writing part of academia. I really liked writing papers and publishing my work and, the research design aspects. And so that is ultimately what led me to an interest in research administration. And then a lot of it is timing too. I got lucky at the time when I was ready and looking for other opportunities. A job came up here in research administration. And I was fortunate to get that role, and it was a really good fit for me, and I had a great team, and it's worked out really well. But I guess that it's sort of the luck is what preparation plus opportunity. So if you can start thinking about those things now, and not to say that academia won't work out for anybody, obviously it does work out for some folks, and I think for me, it was a really hard decision to make to step away from academia. It felt like, and probably was a permanent decision. It's not like you can try something out and then go back and still be competitive. I understand if people are struggling with that decision, but those are some of the things that I thought about and that ultimately led me down this path. So.
Thank you so much, Liz. Over to you, Cody.
Thank you. The question on transition is a little bit of a funny one because I never intended to make academia my career track. Back when I was finishing my master's, that was in political science, and that was really the inflection point for me. I had to decide, am I going to do a PhD in political science, or am I going to do a PhD in public policy? Because they're related, but they're also very different in terms of who you expect you're going to be talking to when you're finished. I knew that I liked working in the public service. By that time, I had already had several jobs in provincial and federal government offices. I decided partially that's why I wanted to do public policy, but also there was a woman. And the decision on which grad school to pursue for the PhD was also, am I going to get married to this woman or not? Because if I don't come to Saskatchewan, then the relationship's over. And so that played a big part in the decision-making process for me, and it worked out well. We work together. We work together now. It's both Vanessa and I's business. And when I did decide to focus on the PhD in public policy stream, and I knew right off the bat, I'm not even going to try and become a professor. I'm going to get into government and hopefully step into a higher level role fairly quickly. So right off the bat, even when I was doing the coursework side, leading up to the comprehensive exams, I was doing things like, telling my instructors, I want to teach, I want to consult, I want to be working while I'm doing this. If you hear of anything that lines up with my research interests, plug me in. Make yourself available. I really like that. You're making your own luck here. I helped start the policy shop on the JSGS campus in Saskatoon. That was a little volunteer group of students who wanted to work with not-for-profits who needed policy advice, policy design work done for them, but they didn't have the financial capacity to hire in the private sector. So we were filling a need that wasn't going to be met otherwise at all. We weren't taking work off of anybody's plate. But that was kind of an example of getting ready to make that transition while you're still in school, which if you're in a PhD track right now, if you're in a postdoc track right now, I'd encourage you to be finding where can you carve out hours to create opportunities for you to get those experiences before you get the letters or before your contract ends up so that you can be prepared to be lucky. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Cody. Lynn, what are your thoughts on this? Your personal experience, I know it's different.
This is on? Okay, first of all, I want to start by saying, Aziz, you mentioned the term alt-act. To me, I don't like that term as well because it almost seems as if it's less than. That if you kind of go a different path than becoming that professor, we all, many of our mentors kind of like say to you, you're going to be the exception. You're exceptional. You're going to land this tenure track job. And someone kind of expressed it to me once, like Canada's the land of hockey, right? So many families have their kids in hockey, and they'll be doing the AAA hockey. They might end up working, being recruited to the Saskatoon Blades or the Regina Pats. And you have about as much of a chance of getting a tenure track job as those kids have of getting recruited to the NHL. And I'm going, oh my God, that's really dismal, right? But I'm here to tell you today, you can have a really rewarding and rich research career. I think a lot of you, if you do a PhD, you're kind of like me, you're just like a perennial research geek. You love doing research, you love reading, you love kind of just this whole, everything to do with the university. You're a lifelong learner, right? And so, I can tell you right now from working with Aziz on this, the new strategic plan for the University of Regina, one of the key themes that's really coming through in the survey and in all of the conversations that we've been having is community engagement and community-based research. That is going to be the trend in the future. It really, really is. And so there are going to be more and more opportunities for people that are working in the nonprofit sector, in government, and even in the private sector industry to do those kind of research partnerships with the university. So you don't have to give up your dream of doing really rigorous research. You know, there seems to be this idea that if you're going to go do research outside of the university, that it's going to be almost like propaganda or something, that it's not really rich or you know, that it's not going to be evidence-based, and that it's somehow less than. And I'm here to tell you that that's not the case. There's so many faculty members that want to do research with industry, and you know, private, public, nonprofit, that there's going to be those opportunities. So it's kind of a bit of a mind shift, I would say. And like I'm a little bit like Cody in that well, kind of, sort of, a little bit. I mean, when I finished my, or I was just kind of, I'd finished the coursework for my master's. I had the very good fortune, my master's was in political science, and I had a few professors that had really interesting stories because they'd worked in the sector, right? Like they'd worked in the political world, had worked in government, and I thought, you know, at that point I thought I would love to be a professor someday, right? But I want to have my own stories to tell, right? So that's why I kind of started my job, you know, my first job was actually in the building where my colleague down there is currently working. I started working with the Ministry of Agriculture, and then jumped into the political world for a long time, thinking, oh, I have a master's in political science. I know everything about politics. I knew nothing, right? But anyways, it was a really amazing experience, and I just ended up getting one job after the other that was increasingly more interesting. And I ended up doing a PhD mainly because it's because of my husband. I have to blame it on him. He knew that the little research geek in me, that I was always, this was always been in the back of my head that I'd like to do a PhD. He came home one day, and one of our clients, because that's what I'm doing right now as a partner in this company with my husband, he came home and he said, how would you like to do a history of amateur sport in Saskatchewan? And I looked at him and I said, the person picked last for every team sport. You think I'd be an appropriate person to do that? And he goes, no, wait a minute. You know, it's actually a very interesting public policy story. Saskatchewan is the only place in the world where a nonprofit organization runs a provincial lottery as a fundraiser for sport, culture, and recreation. And there's all kinds of really interesting public policy stuff around funding to the nonprofit sector. Maybe you could do, you know, your PhD would be in something like that, and then, you know, the client who's asking you to write a history of the amateur sports side will pay for the PhD. And that appealed to me because I thought, okay, I'm too old to go seriously in debt and get more student loans for this. So that's how I kind of went back and did my PhD. And so, like, for me, the topic itself didn't initially really excite me. It was more the research process. And so that's what I would say to all of you, even just in terms of picking other postdoc opportunities if you decide to do that. Or don't just limit yourself to kind of, I'm on this narrow path and this is what I'm interested in, but have your mind open to just new opportunities and just be excited about that research process more than anything. That's my kind of big piece of advice today is sometimes I think we get a little we think too much in the future that we don't take time to enjoy the present, right?
Absolutely. No, thank you so much for your thoughts, Lynn. And I too agree that the alt-ac academic career is usually associated with these negative perceptions that those who pursue these careers are probably failed wannabe academics. And the purpose of today's session and conversation is to dispel these myths and negative perceptions by illuminating the fact that you can pursue these careers and lead a fulfilling, happy life. You can also, outside academia, do research. So what are your thoughts based on your current jobs, how about your involvement in research and this negative perception of alternative academic careers? Do you agree that these alternative academic careers are not something to be desired? I'm just throwing it out here, for Cody. Yeah.
I'll just say one very quick thing about that. Out of all of the PhD candidates that I came up with, one has an academic position, and it wasn't even necessarily something that she planned on. It was just an opportunity that came up. She was looking for a career change. It worked out for her and her family. She's doing fantastic at it. She's doing fantastic work in it. But one person out of, I was on campus, I think, for 7 years. So for me, there is no pejorative aspect to it. The reality is that if you're getting these letters behind your name, realistically, you're going to be working outside of a university setting.
No, thank you so much, Cody.
I was just going to add that, similar to what you said, there are 5 people on the team that I work on right now, and then 5 people on our sister team. So 10 people, 9 out of them have PhD and postdoc experience. And they're all, in fact, half of them from the U of R, from engineering department and from political science. We have a couple of policy analysts. It's not easy. There are only so many tenure track positions. There's so many academic positions, right? And you have to find your way. You have to think about what else you see yourself doing. And it's not that you have to completely switch what you're doing. Think about, I think Lynn was saying, it's the process of exploration. One thing you learn during your grad school is you learn to figure things out. You're a lifelong learner, you're a lifelong researcher. I research about everything, even nutrition, what kind of nutrition is better for my child. I read about everything. I read the ingredients of a product I buy from a store. You just like to find out. You're just not going to be happy with somebody tells you it's this. Well, it can't be that. It's that critical thinking is what you're going to use and apply in your life and in your jobs. So just think about that.
Thank you so much, Supriya. I think both you and Lynn have anticipated the questions that I have here, but here is something that emerged from all your reflection on your career is these alternative academic careers require certain skill sets, right? And I would add maybe a personal narrative if you're applying for these academic careers. So could you share with us today what skills and understanding from your graduate or postdoctoral training have been most valuable to you in your career, in your current career? And so maybe Liz or Lynn, whoever wants to take it. So going back to grad school, to your postdoc, what skills have you found most valuable to you?
Well, I guess I can say one of the things that you don't really realize that you're doing when you're doing your PhD dissertation or working on a postdoc project is that you are managing a really big project. So project management skills is super key that you're doing. Obviously, there's that, advanced kind of research skills that you're learning. And it depends on the type of work that you're doing. In my case, I was doing a qualitative study, and I interviewed hundreds, literally every single person that was still alive that was part of founding Sask Sports, Sask Culture, and Saskatchewan Parks and Recreation I met with, right? So you're really learning communication skills, right? So yes, you're doing focus groups, you're doing interviews, and that's research, but it's like you are learning to communicate. I think a lot of people who, I'm making a broad generalization, of course, but a lot of people who are attracted to do a master's and later a PhD, we're kind of introverts. We like being in the library or sitting in in front of our computers, downloading papers and reading them and nerding out on that, right? And oftentimes our kind of communication with the broader public isn't maybe as good. Maybe that's an area we need to work on, right? So that, honestly, if you're doing kind of a dissertation like I did, where you're meeting a lot of people, you really are gaining those kind of broader skills, right? And so sometimes we just think very loosely about about what it is that we're doing while we're studying XYZ, right? We're becoming an expert in this very narrow little topic that we chose that we're interested in. And no, it's all these other big things that we have to learn how to translate into transferable skills outside of the university, right? Because if your mind is just thinking towards doing your PhD, and then now kind of the next track is the postdoc, and then becoming a professor, that you're not really thinking outside the kind of things you can do within the university. So you can be a research assistant, you can be a sessional instructor, that kind of thing, right? But really think of the broader skills, and you guys are doing the right thing. I would say right now, just by being here. One of the things I wish that I had maybe done a little better job of while I was doing my PhD, and even while I was doing my master's, was networking, right? Giving that opportunity to, come and meet other students, other people. These are going to, especially if you're deciding you're going to stay and live in the community, because like Cody, I was planning on going and doing a PhD somewhere else. I was looking at the time, I was thinking of Madison, Wisconsin. And met a guy, decided that, okay, maybe I'll stay in Saskatchewan. I'll get my head around this, right? And it turned out to be the best decision in my life, because I can't even imagine being a rural sociologist now. Like that idea, no, different chapter in my life.
Thank you so much. Cody, what sort of skills do you think?
Lynn said two of the ones that I was going to bring up. You know how to get organized, you know how to ask questions, you know about methods. Those are such core, critical, transferable skills, no matter where you wind up, if you're working for an organization or if you're trying to start your own thing. I find that's what I carry most with me. Something else that you got me thinking about when you're talking about interviews. When you're conducting interviews, you're just there to collect. You ask probing questions, you ask follow-ups, but you're just there to collect and observe. You're not there to correct or direct. But we all know that in your head, you're listening to these folks and you're pointing out, that's what's tripping you up. That's what's getting in the way of you achieving success at whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish in the organization that you're working in. As a consultant, now I actually get to act on that when I see, that's what's tripping you up. You still have to learn how to communicate it in a way that's safe and respectful of the fact that maybe there's a reason they continue to trip over these things. Maybe there's legacy investments that they've made inside their organization to make it really difficult for them to change their behavior. But now you're in a position as an advisor to actually start helping them take action on what you've been able to observe. And I think where you gain that ability is through the professional disinterest that you cultivate as a researcher, where at the outset, when you're first writing your research proposal, your project plan, whatever it is, you have to make your assumptions extremely clear. You know, there's always sections on that. This is how I assume things work out. This is why I'm assuming this theory is going to be applicable in this situation. As a researcher, you're trained to be aware of your assumptions and be very ready to discard them when the data no longer reflects that reality. I think that's one of the things that Vanessa and I are finding as consultants is most valuable to our clients. The fact that we can bring that sort of dispassionate assessment of the situation and then try and help them come up with, you know, 3 or 4 different ways that will address that issue while still respecting all of the other contextual factors which are encouraging you to make continually poor investments maybe. And also just the encouragement that grad school builds in you to be curious and to ask questions and to, you know, learn about new things. Like one of our clients is a provincial sporting organization right now. That's not a plan I ever had. It turns out that it's absolutely fascinating. I had no idea it was so complicated and so involved and so interesting. If grad school teaches you to be curious or encourages you to be curious, that's a trait that you can take out into the world and apply in careers outside of the university setting, which is going to be very valuable to a lot of different employers. I'm finding, I think I'm proof. We're making a go of it too. It's just 2 of us, so.
Absolutely. How about you, Liz?
I'll just maybe bring up a couple of different ones that haven't been brought up. So my background is a little bit different. I was in the hard sciences. I was doing experimental research. And so for me, the research skills that I thought of were like hands-on in the lab. I can manipulate genomes and I can do, which is hard to apply broadly to other careers. And so I had a hard time really kind of identifying those soft skills and seeing a way to apply them beyond the lab. But it's so true, like they are so applicable, so don't underestimate them. A couple of things that I use all the time, prioritizing tasks. So I always was balancing multiple experiments at the same time and teaching labs and doing all these different things. That's a hugely important skill, being able to prioritize and manage your time well. And another thing that I think came out of my time as a grad student and postdoc is resourcefulness. Like we didn't have a lot of money in our lab. We didn't have a lot of the fancy equipment and things. So I spent a lot of time like looking through old journal articles to find a method that didn't need XYZ machine so that I could still get to results. And so that kind of tenacity and that willingness to go and look for answers myself, take initiative, like all of that benefits me now where I can, you know, if someone has a challenge or a problem, I am willing and able to I just go and look for it. And I don't even think twice. And I think a lot of that comes from my experiences as a grad student. And I would also just say, I know people have mentioned like research outside of the university setting. I do want to bring up, there are a lot of opportunities within the university outside of being an academic. So I have never left the university. I never plan to leave the university. I love it here. I love academic research and I support it in a different way now. I don't do it directly myself, but in a way for me, that's even more fulfilling because I have influence and I've contributed to so many more projects that way. I've expanded my own horizons, like you were saying, learning about sport. I now do a lot of stuff with nuclear energy. I know all kinds of stuff about nuclear energy beyond my old Simpsons like prejudices. So yeah, and that's something I would say that's expanding all the time. Like the expectations now for research project design, there's aspects related to equity, diversity, and inclusion that are increasing all the time. Knowledge translation is a huge area. The community-based research, research ethics, data management is becoming hugely important. So when you're thinking about research and the things that you're doing with it and that you like about it, it can be broader than your specific project. And if academia is something that you love, there are ways to make a career here beyond just the tenure track position.
Thank you so much, Liz. You mentioned, Supriya, curiosity, but how about skills from your perspective?
Oh, for sure. I think a lot of them have already been mentioned, like ability to organize, prioritizing, resourcefulness. One thing I will mention is your experience with technology. During my postdoc, we did a lot of sequencing. I think Liz did some of that too. Like genomics, I had to learn programming. I didn't know anything about programming, so I had to learn all that from scratch. So the computer skills, I mean, I don't do programming anymore, but if there came a situation where we need some of the scripting experience or any of that, I think I'll be able to produce that. Even like your skills with the Excel, your writing, Microsoft Word and things like that, I think those will be very useful as well. I want to speak a little bit about communication skills. I can't talk enough about it. When I say communication, it's not just writing, presentation, and those things. It's to be able to make a connection with the people. And when you go outside of academia, you will meet all kinds of people, right? They may have a high school degree, they may have an undergraduate degree. And sometimes in academia, we sit on this high horse, we have this strong identity of, oh, I have a PhD, I have this. And we do know so much about this one very niche area, and then we're so excited to talk about, throw all these technical terms and things like that. Sometimes it's not helpful at all. So at an interview, you have to be able to talk in a way you're getting to their level. I'm not being condescending. I'm not saying they're in a lower level, we're in a higher level. But you talk in a way that's in simple words to be able, so that they can understand what you're saying. It's so-called the elevator pitch. For example, during my PhD, my research was about understanding, genomics of these specific genes and how they produce all these products that help solubilize iron in soil. I can say that in a very technical way. Maybe somebody who can understand that. But if I have to simplify that, I would say something like, oh, I'm looking at the soil bacteria that can help solubilize iron, because Saskatchewan soil has almost no iron or available iron, and we're going to use this bacteria to develop a product, hopefully, that helps the plant absorb iron. So, think about how you're going to explain what you do to a high schooler or even an elementary school kid. And add some humor, some kindness, and speak in a very simple, as a simple person, not somebody with a PhD or, just becoming humble and, just being down to earth and being nice. It actually goes a long way.
Fantastic, thank you. I'm happy to say that this is why we have the GATE Center, the Graduate Advanced Training and Entrepreneurship Center. We focus on these skills, the project management skills, the ability, that tenacity that you talked about, persistence and organizational skills and so on and so forth. If you haven't participated in some of the workshops, I would urge you to consider that. I have a list of questions, but I want to turn it over actually to the audience, given that we're running a bit short on time. So I'm going to turn it over to the audience for questions to our panelists. Maybe in person or online. If you have a question, please, from online, okay.
I do. Brandon, are you good? So Lynn, it's for you. I'm very interested in your observation that community engagement and community-based research are areas of growth. Sorry. Can you talk more about this and possible careers and what you would suggest a postdoc to do to prepare to work in these areas?
That's a really good question. I think one of the key things is that in order to be successful in getting a lot of the really coveted grants, like the NSERC grants, the CIHR, the SHRC grants, academics really do need to have strong ties with community partners, right? So I would say number one, volunteer or reach out to people that are doing work in that area. Just indicate that you have a real strong interest in that area. There's lots of professors that they're working on their grant applications, and if you find people that are doing work that is at least of real great interest to you, the people that have been very, very successful in getting those grants, and I would say, if you're wanting to stay on the university side, then kind of see if you can get built into the grants, because a lot of times when you're writing the grant applications, they need to kind of have a certain number of postdocs worked in, or also kind of PhD students. You guys are all kind of past that point, but from that perspective, but also look at some of the larger kind of nonprofits out there that are doing research, and you can be the connector, when you're there, and you can be the one that's saying, like, because you're going to be doing a much better job for your organization. When you're working in the nonprofit sector, the biggest thing you're always trying to do is you're trying to prove that what you're doing is really good and needs more money. So one of the things you could learn how to do is program evaluation. Like if you can have that opportunity to take a class. I know my colleague Cody, and his area of expertise teaches that in Luther, and in your professional life does a lot of that kind of work. That's something, if you're working, whether it's in government or whether it's in the nonprofit sector or even in industry, you're always wanting to investigate whether what you're doing is you're moving in the right direction. You're wanting to prove that what you're doing is warranting more money or change of policy, that sort of thing, right? So if you're trying to get into that area, I would just say, be curious and don't be afraid to just go out to community events and introduce yourself. That's the biggest thing. I think a lot of us, we're so scared to kind of put ourselves out there, grab a more extroverted friend if you're like that. and sort of go out to, if there's an annual general meeting, maybe you're interested in multicultural policy. Go to the kind of culture day activities, and make sure you introduce yourself to some of these people. You'll be really surprised. Most people are really excited to meet you. It sounds a little bit more intimidating than you think, but take advantage of those opportunities too. So if you're at an event like this, Cody was saying that he was just at something rather similar at Johnson Shoyama. Stay afterwards, introduce yourself to, the panelists, introduce yourself to fellow students that are sitting around you. You never know when those connections are going to take you somewhere. For instance, there's a young woman she's doing her master's at the Johnson Shoyama. She just came up to me at an event that Luther College was putting in, and she is so skilled, right? But she's a relatively new Canadian. She just moved here not that long ago from Bangladesh, doesn't have a lot of connections. Within about 5 minutes, I could tell this is somebody, if I had the ability to hire her, I'd hire her in a second, right? Amazing, you could just see the critical thinking skills. This is someone, I looked at her resume and I'm going, oh my God, I'm feeling really intimidated by you, right? And so she took time to say, can I have a coffee with you? And then she shared her resume with me, and I ended up, I didn't have a full-time job with her, but I hired her to do some work for a strategic planning session that I was leading for a client. And that led to her meeting somebody else and then, ending up having a full-time job, right? It is, in this day and age, I really say it's almost more than it ever was before. The really fulfilling jobs you're gonna get are gonna be because of those networks and those connections you're making. And honest to God, if I would have heard that even 10 years ago, I would have started having a heart attack, because I'm not the kind of person that naturally likes to go out to these things. And when I was doing my PhD, that's one of the things I wish I would have done a little bit more of. I really didn't put myself out there. I mean, granted, I did have little children, and I realized that I had to treat this like a job or I'm never going to finish this. So I was very, very protective of my time. But one of the things I wish I would have done more of is that networking, getting to know people on campus and that, right? And you guys have lots more opportunities than I did, because it's not that long ago that I finished my PhD, but it was pre-Aziz. So there was nothing. There was really nothing, right? So attend the GATE stuff. Like I am serious. Like really wonderful opportunities to learn and have those transferable skills that you're going to need. But also, like, it gets you away from the kind of, I think the worst part about doing the PhD, or even kind of when you're doing a postdoc, is that you're kind of by yourself too much.
Isolation.
Right? You're really isolated. So it's really, really important for your mental health, I think, to come to events like this. And you're going to learn new skills too when you go to these things that Aziz is putting and his team are putting on. But, you know, more importantly, it's going to kind of protect you a little bit from that, you know, you're stuck in your own head. And that can be your worst enemy, is being stuck in your own head, because we all we see around us, everybody's like has the Instagram kind of persona of, like, you know, or the LinkedIn, right? Like of all the great things they're doing, right? So we tend to think that, oh my God, I'm such a loser. Like all these people around me are publishing all these papers and going to these amazing conferences, and what am I doing? I'm never gonna finish this stupid PhD. Why did I do this, right? We all think like that, you know, and it's not the case. Everybody in their own way is kind of struggling. And like, I think it was Cody that said that only one out of his cohort ended up getting a professor job. In that case, that was the same with me. And this person is now kind of one of the most successful researchers at the University of Regina. But she got her job partly through luck. It was like just right time, right place, right? Initially, when she had applied for a tenure track position, she was shortlisted. But she was like not their first choice. But then all of a sudden, the funding got cut, so that the university was going through some tough times. And so it was pulled, and they said, well, we'll see about next year. Maybe we'll be able to offer a tenure track position. So the other two candidates left for wherever, and this individual ended up taking a limited one-year term position, right? Proved herself to be a superstar, and then when the funding did come through, came in. But, you know, it was partly luck, right? You know, so like I think that's the biggest thing, is just be willing to kind of walk through those doors and throw yourself out there and not be scared. You know, don't be shy. Go up to people and just introduce yourself and say, I'm really interested in the work that your organization does. Is there, you know, anything that I could do? Join a board, right? You know, if there's an organization in an area that you're so interested in, they're constantly looking for new blood to kind of be on, you know, help with this kind of stuff. This is your way, this might be your way in.
Thank you so much. Cody, I think you were itching to add.
There was only two things I wanted to add. Do everything she just said, but also if you want to do community-based research, you're trying to build relationships, and relationships take time. So if you think you want to do it, start now. Because for Vanessa and I, it takes between 6 and 10 months to turn a conversation into a client. That was my experience when I was working with the Policy Shop over 10 years ago now. How'd that happen? If this is something you want to do, find organizations who do work that you find valuable and try and plug yourselves into them now, with the expectation that it'll amount to something in about 12 months. And one comment about joining boards: find boards that are actually high functioning enough to take advantage of you. If the first thing that some executive director or some board chair says to you when they meet you is, oh, would you like to join our board? The answer is no. If they've met you and they're asking you that in the first 30 seconds of meeting you, don't walk into that one. Find one that's working, operating well enough that they can actually take full advantage of your skills. So, and you've got something to sell. You've got something to sell. You've got something they want. Don't be shy about being picky about who you work with.
Please.
And I'll just maybe add one kind of more general piece of advice. So one thing that I wasn't aware of when I was a graduate student and postdoc is how many different professional organizations and associations exist. So if there's an area that you're interested in, whether that's community-based research, research administration, research security, whatever the case may be, do a Google search, find the Canadian Professional Association and see what resources they have. There's webinars, there's mentorship, there's forums, there's training programs you can do that are really specialized. Like, that's maybe a way to dip your toe into some different things and access some more career-specific professional development that you wouldn't necessarily be able to get anywhere else.
Can I just add to that just really quickly? There's two organizations that the University of Regina is members of. One is called Research Impact Canada. The other is Community-Based Research Canada. And both of those organizations, students are members just because of the institutional membership that the U of R has, and they both put on some really amazing professional development stuff. Community-Based Research Canada has a community of practice that meets monthly, and I try to attend as often as I can because I'm learning new things just by the presenters. But Research Impact Canada, one of the things they offer is a free knowledge mobilization course. And that's like, just like, again, that's helping you to translate that research that you're doing into simple language that anyone can understand, and it's a really good course. And you'll see that someone from the Office of Research Services will usually it's usually in the spring, it's sent around, and they're asking for people that want to attend this, and it's online, asynchronous, but they bring people together, I think, weekly for live Zoom sessions where you get to network and meet people across the country. So take advantage of those kinds of opportunities too. I think we, as students, I don't know, I was so focused on just getting done that I just didn't take advantage of a lot of kind of things that probably did exist, but I didn't really look around to see if, they're there, but those are two organizations that are amazing, and you can learn a lot from.
Yeah. Supriya, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, just a couple of quick things. 100% agree with you guys. You never know what can lead to something. And I'm an example, a real living example. Like I said, I was part of the PACS committee and the AVPR hiring committee. That's how I made connection with the AVPR, and that's how I landed my first job. So don't be hesitant to go out there and put yourself out there. And also one more thing, if there is a field that's somewhat related to what you're doing and you see yourself working in that area, look for like certifications or some kind of training that you can take that you can put on your resume. Like once I was committed that, okay, I can see myself working in like environmental climate change and sustainability, I took a certification from UFT. It was online, it was during COVID, there's lots of online certifications. And talk about it in your resume, and that just shows that you're committed to make that shift into the field. So little things like that go a long way. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Do we have any questions from the audience here or online?
There is one more online.
Online? Okay. Could you please read it?
For STEM multidisciplinary scientists with a few years of postdoc experience who are interested in moving into consulting, what specific skills should we focus on developing to really stand out in applications? And what's the most effective way to position ourselves to make that transition successfully?
Cody, would you like to start us off on that?
Sure. The first word I'll go after in that question is applications. I don't apply for work. Vanessa and I get offered work because of the relationships we've built. So I'll say that again. Start building relationships now if you think that you want to move into consulting. And I fully endorse it. We're having a great time. The intellectual freedom, the stimulation, the sense of satisfaction in the work, idea that our work actually matters. These people find it valuable. I really endorse it. But it's not necessarily a job that you apply for. So that's why I say invest in building relationships now. What other skills are you going to have to develop? I had no idea how to run a business, and I'm very fortunate that I'm married to somebody who also wanted to learn how to run a business. If I was trying to do this by myself, it would not be getting done, because we split our time between doing the work that we've been hired to do, finding new work, building new relationships. So, maintaining work-life balance in that kind of situation is no less challenging than it was when we were grad students. So whatever workshops you can get into for free while you're still a student or a postdoc, take those. Take some basic business development classes, take some basic marketing classes, story branding, if that's available to you, take all of that kind of stuff. sign up for everything. And also, one other thing, make yourself available to give presentations or lead workshops at things like Luther College's nonprofit and Voluntary Sector Studies Network. They have, it's not reimagining nonprofits, it is called something else.
Growing
nonprofits. Thank you. Whatever your equivalent is, find those sorts of professional associations that are putting on workshops and volunteer to lead and facilitate for them, because that'll both build your exposure in the sector, help you start building those relationships, and help you start learning how to speak to non-specialists, because that's absolutely critical. It does not matter if you're the smartest person in the room. If you can't convey what it is that you need to convey to your client, you may as well not be there at all. So put yourself out there and start doing that now. I'm an introvert. I am not somebody who ever wanted to do networking. Starting off, I had to challenge myself. I'm going to stay here for 30 minutes. I'm going to talk to 3 people. Then I can leave. If that's what you want to start with that. Eventually, you get more comfortable, you get more confident, and then it doesn't become such a psychological hazard to sign up and agree to do stuff like this. You can learn to do it and just build that strength and aptitude slowly over time.
Thank you so much. Lynn, did you want to add something to that question?
I look at the word consultant, and I always laughed because, like, I worked in the political world for a long time, and I would always say to the cabinet ministers that I advised, what's your plan post-election if you don't win? And the answer 9 times out of 10 is, I'm going to be a consultant. Well, it's a lot harder to just become a consultant than you might think. It's like you're not just going to, like, apply for a job. Like, really, you might want to think of, for instance, one of my most rewarding jobs that I had was with the Saskatchewan office of the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives. So there's a lot of different kind of think tanks and policy research kind of organizations out there. That's somewhere that you can think about. A lot of times they are hiring people to do contract research, that sort of thing. So keep an eye open for that. Get to know, go and introduce yourselves, through email, or just say, can I have a Zoom chat with you? I'd like to, you might find some opportunity to do some contract research, right? Because a lot of the research, speaking specifically with the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives, is that their research will be funded, probably by some of the public sector unions and other kind of public institutions will fund a research project, whether it might be on childcare or whatever social policy issue that you're looking at. And so there's opportunities like that to sort of get your start kind of doing like maybe that first project that is, that gives you that something to put on your resume a little bit, right? And I'm going to tell you this one story. There's a person that came to our organization. He had finished a PhD in English, and he moved back to Regina because his wife got a job at the university. And he was like not getting anywhere in applying for jobs, and he wanted to get a communications job. Absolute masterful communicator, marketing, brilliant, genius of a guy. But his PhD was kind of limiting him, right? And he came up to us and he said, I want to work for you. You don't even have to pay me, right? But I need to get something on my resume that's not related to the university. And we said, well, we're going to pay you something, but, we feel bad because we can't pay you as much as we'd like to pay you. But, that was that by him doing that, and it was just part-time, he did this for a year or so. Then he was more competitive when it came time to applying for some of these jobs. And even with that, my husband had to step in and call this one organization. He wasn't getting an interview. And he basically called through his own network. I always call it the Luther College mafia, because all these guys kind of went to Luther College together. But, he was able to call this guy and say, are you crazy? You're not interviewing this guy? This is one of the most brilliant people. You would be so lucky as to have him on your team. And he ended up getting the job. But it was because of those connections, right? So don't be afraid to do that kind of stuff. That's what I would have to say is take advantage of those, and if you don't think you have anybody like that, then just don't be shy and go and introduce yourself to people. You would be really surprised. I know that it seems like we're living in an angrier and more horrible world. Most people are still really kind.
Absolutely.
And will want to help you out.
Thank you so much. I want to conclude on that kind note and just invite my fellow panelists here if there is anything you want to conclude with, some kind notes to our audiences, both online and in person. And we will have 15 minutes set aside for networking and informal chat. So, any final thoughts? All right, yeah, Liz.
I was going to say, hang in there. I know it can be really challenging. I think looking for jobs and interviewing for jobs, like all of that stuff is just can be soul destroying. It's my least favorite thing, but just hang in there. You'll get to the place that you're supposed to be eventually. And do the networking, meet people, think about skills you want to apply, and if you can get through a PhD, you'll figure it out.
Thank you so much. If you get through the PhD, it means you can get through anything in the world. That's really, it's a huge challenge that you're undertaking by going through the PhD. So with that, as I said,
Can I say one more thing?
Oh, sorry.
Take risks. Don't be afraid of taking risks.
Absolutely.
You've taken a risk however many times to even get this far. Don't stop taking risks. Just jump in. Put yourself out there.
Absolutely. Thank you. All right, with that, I'm going to invite you to mingle. Please avail yourself of food and ask any questions. Feel free to network with our panelists. Please join me in thanking our panelists today.